Kevin, lovely to have you on the podcast today. I'm really glad that you could make it and to find out a bit more about what you do in Wealth Builders. Tell us a
Mhm.
bit more.
Well, Wealth Builders is a passion of mine. 95% of the population, whether it's the UK, US, any Western economy, just simply don't become financially independent. So they live a life, I suppose, of uncertainty. And where life is generally uncertain, isn't it? We've seen it, economic uncertainty, political uncertainty, even wars across different countries. Life is fundamentally uncertain. But if you can create what I call multiple streams of recurring income for cash flow, fundamental difference between cash flow and accumulation. But if you can build multiple things, all of which work in different ways, then you can create that economic uncertainty for yourself, for your family, and for the next generation to follow. Because as you build those things, you build knowledge, you build wisdom, and you can pass all of those things on with huge skill, huge integrity, and enjoy the journey, which is all part of it, really. So it's been my
Absolutely.
passion really for 30 years or so, but been teaching probably for about 15 of that. And it's something that is building a thriving community of like-minded people, because that's the other thing, isn't it? Why 95% don't make it is they almost get brainwashed or they work in lockstep with what they're taught. Yet by surrounding yourself with a community of people who are on the same journey as you give yourself a much greater chance of success. And that's what it's all about with HMO success or wealth success. It's all about getting a great result. And we like to do that. And I think we're the only wholly impartial and holistic wealth educating company in the UK, and we focus, as we talked a little on our little preamble about our focus really on the whole family. So usually, if you talk to someone like an IFA or something like that, they look at you. They look at you as a couple, let's say, but we talk about you, the up generation, the people older than you, and what are they going to leave, and the down generation passing on the wisdom to the next generation in a way that's age appropriate. So it is a real holistic thing. So it captures my imagination, keeps me going when my wife says, "When are you going to retire, Kev?" But I don't, because I just love doing it. And when you meet people like you who love doing what you're doing, and award winners too, so congratulations on that. I just love doing it. So thank you for the opportunity to share a little of what we do. So hopefully that
Thank
helps.
you. Thank you, Kevin. Great introduction there. I think you said, I think you may have meant economically stable. I think you said uncertain, and I think you meant certain, but I think we get the message. We get the message about creating certainty.
Yeah.
So I've got a few questions for you, Kevin. I'm gonna pose some challenges to you. Are you open to a bit of a challenge on
Why
the
not? Why
podcast?
not? If I can't do it after this number of years, I'm in trouble, aren't I? So pretty confident about where I come at it from this from. Yeah.
So, if somebody was interested in what you're doing and they're interested in building their wealth and they came across you, what is it that you offer to them within Wealth Builders?
Well, I think, when you look at why people don't make it, other than the kind of economic background and things, and I think there's a combination of things. There's overwhelm because we're deluged with information. Who to trust? Is there a plan, a step-by-step plan? So we embark with people who work with us on a monthly plan. So every month they're doing something. We have a mantra within Wealth Builders, which is never let 30 days go by without doing something that builds momentum towards building your wealth. Because wealth is not a do something this month and you get the result next month. It's almost a reflection of nature itself. It takes time for some of those things to turn into fruit. And so what we encourage people to do is, first of all, understand their own personal DNA. Who are they? What are they like? What are they not like? What's their wealth dynamic, which is a tool we use to assess what keeps people in flow. So we've got the environment, we've got a community, we've got coaches, we've got a platform of education, a roadmap for them to follow, and that distinct, not just aiming at what you're doing, but also how to share that to be a great money role model for the next generation as well. So I don't think there's anybody else doing that. I think what I see most people looking for is individual silos of opportunity. So I'll go and talk to someone about property, or I'll go and talk to someone about stock market or trading, or I might go and talk to somebody about building a business. But it's not all encapsulated in one. So that's what I'm most proud of, is that holistic nature of what we do.
So you try and ensure that the overall theme is to enable people to build their assets and build their cash flow. But whichever strategy they choose, there's education on those different strategies depending on people's personal preferences.
Correct. Whether it's online, offline, I just came from a live event last night. We're doing cash flow 101. We play that every month. We do site visits. We got wine tasting coming up, because wealth is about experiences, not just money. So lots of things that really try and engage people together, because I think community, when by nature we're a community-driven, ecosystem is all about that community, and yet most people tend to try and do it on their own and get pulled apart by the job or by the business that sucks them back in again. So by creating an environment, I think people have got a much greater chance of success, because they can see what other people, not just in theory, are doing, but they can go and visit someone who's doing what it is they are thinking of doing. And sometimes the very act of doing that can mean, oh, now I see that, I don't want to do that. So it short circuits the process, or shortcuts economically the process. So people get there, first of all, to income security, which is enough money to live a reasonable life, a lockdown lifestyle, as we call it. And then that's income security. And then independence is when you've got enough money to do whatever you want to do, and then onwards and upwards from there. And so and we're counting the income streams. So by having multiple income streams flowing at different times, and most people can find time to do at least two, and then we got 7 that we work on, but you can, most people find the time to do 2, sometimes 3, and the more they get to that income security, then once they've got security, they're no longer dependent on the job or the business, and that normally frees them a bit more time. So there's a bit of compounding going on along the way.
So that's really interesting. And what do you find of those 7 pillars of wealth that you talk about? Which are the ones that people are initially attracted to, and which are the ones they least know about when they first start working with you in WealthBuilders?
Great question. I think the 70% of our community prefer property as a source of wealth, and why not? It's so tangible. We're an island after all, and people love that. So an Englishman's home, or an English person's home, all those usual phrases built into the fabric of who we are as in the UK. So property number 1, investing number 2, and then obviously we've got.
And when you say investing, you mean sort of stocks and shares, trading, that kind of thing?
Alternative markets, gold, cryptocurrency, crowdfunding, a whole range of different things. In fact, the event we had yesterday was 3 different people talking about 3 different approaches to investing. We had about 100 people, give or take, in the room, and all just learning from what people do. And because we're agnostic on what people do, we don't promote anything. So it's not WealthBuilders promotes anything. We promote education and allow people really to choose the direction of travel they want to go, which is why we love to connect with other people who are outstanding in their field. So WealthBuilders are not an expert in everything. We're a guide. So we curate things. So we'd work with outstanding people in property, outstanding people in tax, outstanding people in law. So our kind of philosophy is, if you're going to build wealth that's sustainable and will last to future generations, you need to become a master. You need to become a master of something, and ideally 2 or 3 things. And therefore we try and connect them to other masters, people who've mastered the art of what it is they do. And there's no doubt with you and HMOs, for example, but there's so many different strategies in property. If you unpicked 7 in property alone, there's probably 20 strategies. So if you unpacked all of the 7 different assets, the fundamental assets that you can use to build wealth, and there aren't more, and I've tried over 30 years to get 8, and I can only find 7, then there's just multiple ways. It's a bit like, I often liken it to, I'm really passionate about financial literacy for children, and I have a vision in my head, which is, if you asked 100 kids in a sort of a school hall, and you surrounded them with Lego and they got excited and said, I want you to build me a house, you get 100 different houses, but they're all got the same vision, which is to build a house. And wealth is exactly the same. So there's no 2 people building their wealth in exactly the same combinations in exactly the same way with an exactly the same starting amount of finance, the amount of time they've got available, their passion for something, how they connect and collaborate with others, whether they've got a spouse, a partner, a business partner. All of those things will add a dimension to it. And we're fortunate to be able to sit down with people and kind of see what they have. We do something called a wealth map, which is a mind map of everything in their life. And when you see that and see all of your money in one place, it helps them to start to create that plan. So it's very visual. I mean, it's a visual organization, and I'm the visionary in the company. That's my role within the company, is to constantly look out for, you know, really great ideas that other people can copy. It's much easier to copy something than try and invent everything for yourself.
Yes. Okay, great. So it seems to me that a big focus of Wealth Builders is to, as you say, help the wider family, or for those people who joined Wealth Builders, they're looking at the wider family. But there is also the thought in my mind, which is that can you really reach out beyond the grave? Should you be planning to reach out beyond the grave? Look at families who have perhaps had parents that are extremely wealthy, passed it on to their children, and their children have just frittered it away or wasted it or got into drugs and drink and rock and roll. There's nothing wrong with rock and roll, but perhaps the other two are a little bit more serious. So, I think there's some big questions here, Kevin. Should people really be thinking about protecting the next generation, or shouldn't we let the next generation discover it for themselves?
Well, that's a really interesting thing. I mean, if you think about the natural progress of humankind, I mean, we're living longer than ever before. So the life expectancy of a child born today is 100 years of age. And that sounds great, we're living longer, but it means, the next generation of children are going to be probably working into their 80s if they don't get help. So I think as parents, we have an obligation to help. But that help isn't necessarily, though, just about the finance. I mean, there's a whole language of the point you just made, which is shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, or clogs to clogs in 3 generations, where the pioneering families, we call them, make the money, the next generation enjoy it, but they don't do very much with it, and or for any of those reasons you gave. And then the next generation have got no connection to the previous generation, and therefore the money has no significance for them at all. Now, I have a different view to that. So my view is we create something called a family charter. And the family charter serves to not just protect the money by the right legal instruments, the right tax instruments, because otherwise there's inheritance tax, which is a voluntary tax in many respects. And in some cases, the taxman gets more than you'd pass on anyway. And if you do the job of building assets really well, the assets must outlive you. Because if you've got a portfolio of property, or you've got a portfolio of other things that are yielding cash flow, that cash flow is going to continue. So in the charter, the process of educating the next generation, which we do by starting to gradually involve children, one of the tactics we use, and you asked the question, I didn't answer it, which is what is the least popular? And the least popular is pensions. Right? Because people have an association of the word pensions, which is grey, it's dreary, and it's something that you do not disturb till you're in your 60s or 70s. Well, we bring that concept of the pension and put it fairly and squarely on our roadmap at step 7 on a 9-step roadmap. And it's called a SAS pension, which is a pension that involves potentially the whole family. So we invite our younger family in at 18 and beyond, and we start to give them lessons. So those lessons, they begin to see there's not just money coming, there's a dialogue, there's a whole range of different things we encourage to build the bridge to the previous generations, including recording grandparents talking so that they're remembered in future generations as well. And the imagination I've got as a person is my next generation, I'm a granddad, but the generation after that will be raising a glass of whatever, maybe not sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but they'll be raising a glass and toasting the old bugger who set it up. And so by creating family trusts, by creating wisdom, the whole idea is to allow the next generation to enjoy it, but feel a stewardship responsibility to pass it on to the next generation.
And I
So
suppose that's kind of where my question is, Kevin, is I completely agree with the whole education side of it. I think that's really important and very valuable, and that's something of great wealth that we can pass on to future generations. But I think there is, in my mind, there is a debate about how much do I really want to pave the way for my four boys, to, if you like, if I'd been handed it, let's say I'd been handed this package of, a multi-million-pound property portfolio when I was 20 or
yeah,
something, or 25. I mean, fortunately, my dad is still alive. My mum passed away a few years ago, but I still have my dad. Would I be doing what I'm doing today? Would I be driven? Would I have the fire in my belly to achieve? And I don't know if I
right.
would. So
Well,
I wonder about this. I ponder these philosophical questions about to what degree should we be providing financially for the next generation,
yeah.
if for them to just fritter it all away.
Well, it's an interesting point, and I think many people do that. And of course, the generation above us are the silent generation who never spoke about money. Money was taboo. So, in some respects, money's left to the next generation, and because there's no wisdom or instruction passed on, then they don't have the skills to deal with it, which is why athletes tend to become poor in retirement. Professional athletes, well-paid athletes. We've heard the stories of lottery winners who lose the money in relatively short order. I take your point, but the point is, for me, it's about choice. So if you think about the choices, then you can make those. So one of the choices that can be made very easily is by creating a set of trusts with trustees. Then the next generation don't get the money. Essentially, the money's protected. So if they want to be supported to build a business, then money can be loaned, even interest-free, loaned to them to then do it and then pay it back, so that they feel there's an obligation to build and maintain family wealth for generations to come. So I come from that place myself, much to the chagrin of my middle son, who's a lawyer. He's like, Dad, can't I just have the money? And it's, no, son, you're not getting it, because this is the whole point. It's my philosophy, and my philosophy is this. Of course, they'll be okay. I think that's the whole point. When you become in control of multiple streams of recurring income, as I mentioned, they can be affected. Of course they can, but when you've got multiple ones, you're not damaged. So you create that economic certainty, and apologies if I got it wrong before, but you create that certainty. And when you get that certainty, it then means there's security for the next generation to rely upon. And they can see that, and therefore that should shape their decision making in the future. So I'm very comfortable with the idea of choice, and you want to give the money, give it. If you don't want to give it, don't give it. You can support charities and other good causes and so on. Everything is possible, but it starts from the point of the choice only becomes genuinely possible when you've established your wealth. And if you haven't, then you're not going to leave anything anyway. So I'd rather be wealthy than not, and I'd rather have choice than not, and I'd rather control my own family philosophy than not. And I give people who I meet within the Wealth Builder program those choices, and they choose the path they want. In the same way, the Lego bricks, they choose their own. How are you going to pass that house on? Well, that's up to you. I just tell you what I do and how we do things and what choices you've got. It's up to you how you do it.
I think the point, though, you make about pensions is a very good one, because one of the arguments that people make is that you can't leverage, the benefit of property is it's a very leverageable asset, and there's nothing really else that you can leverage to that extent, which is true. However, there are, of course, massive tax benefits in pensions, and you could call that a leverageable element of pension planning.
Absolutely.
That you can definitely benefit if you plan your pensions correctly, whether it's a SIP or a SAS. Even an employer pension, a company pension, even that there is a certain element of leverage in that, because it's not all your cash, it's not all your money going into that pot. And depending on how it's structured, it can also be a hedge against inflation potentially. So I think pensions is certainly one of those areas that people really don't utilize enough of to maximize for other purposes perhaps you'd like to say a little bit about that in terms of what a SAS can do, Kevin, because I know that's one of your areas of expertise as well.
Yeah, well, I don't want to bang a drum about any particular pension, because you make a very good point that all pensions are tax relievable. In other words, you get tax back. So whatever income tax you're paying personally, or whatever, if you've got a business, whatever tax you're paying, you can redirect tax and build a pot. Now, what you do with the pot is up to you. And there are also some, very clever ways where you can actually redirect your national insurance contributions as well. So you can almost get a double whammy benefit. And, we just talked a minute ago about inheritance. Pension money is ring fence protected, so it can't be damaged by litigation or by indebtedness, so that can't happen. And also it's inheritance tax free. So there's real value in that. But the real thing for me, for most people who have any kind of a pension, is they don't really understand what the vehicle is doing. So they tend to delegate that money to a third party, feeling a lack of confidence perhaps around the pension subject. And that delegation often into the hands of an industry, which has got a checkered past in terms of fees, about their ability to deliver service, and deliberately keeping fees up in an environment where we can see how technology has brought fees down, but they don't really pass them on. So there's profiteering going on in an industry, and people kind of close down on that and just don't pay attention to it. But the second point, other than fees, is anyone can learn about how the stock market works. Anybody can learn about any of the other assets. And the great thing about a pension where you can control it yourself sounds onerous, but it isn't when you learn. Like anything in wealth, you've got to learn it first. Education is the precursor to all wealth building. But once you can master that, then you can use the money today. So instead of waiting, if you're in your 40s and you think, oh, I don't want to do a pension because I'm going to have to wait till I'm in my 60s or 70s, but you can use that money today. So the real value of the SAS pension or small self-administered scheme, even the language is clumsy and clunky. The benefits, however, are not. And for many people, and I mentioned 70% of our community-like property, well, you can buy property today, whether it's commercial property, whether it's getting involved in even HMOs to a certain degree once you know what you're doing. There are so many ways that you can use pensions that are accumulating today tax-free, with the government paying in national insurance or tax, or your company paying money in and reducing your corporation tax bill. And then you can use that money to help grow your business or grow your personal wealth and involve your children. So I think there's a fascination for me around it, because as someone who's a qualified professional advisor by background, I've got the qualification of an IFA. I see that delegation for most people turn into abdication pretty quick. And the big shock for me, Wendy, and I'll circle back to the point that I made right at the beginning, which is wealth is about creating certainty when life is fundamentally uncertain. Now, if you imagine that most people build their pot, they build in the stock market, maybe don't pay attention, they get to a figure, right? Let's say they got a few 100,000 in their pension when they reach retirement. Now, all of a sudden, they've got to cross a bridge to a journey of retirement where their money could go up and down in a heartbeat, where you could have a tragedy like 2007-8 credit crunch, when people lost 30-40% of their money and had no control over that. And if you lose 30 or 40% of your money, and that's what you're looking for to provide you with future income, you're going to have an uncertain life. So the reason I like SAS is SAS you can deploy in property or business or the other things, where you can take a much more personal control. So no, SAS is not for everyone, surely not. But it is for entrepreneurial people who want to take that control. And fortunately, we attract that sort of audience at WealthBuilders, not the people who want to delegate their money and hope for the best when they reach their 70s. I read a dreadful statistic, because I said I'm still an IFA, that 60%, no, it wasn't that high, 50% of people who get to retirement age take all of their pension out, all of it, right? They just
What do they do with it?
who knows? But they pay the tax on it.
Pay off the mortgage, I suppose, maybe.
And then what they got to live on? They're either hoping the state pension supports them, and the average income for UK retirees in this country is about £15,000. So, you know, if you can live on £15,000 a year, then that's fine. But I think for most people who have an aspiration larger than that, then it's about getting involved. And I like to ruffle a few feathers, and I'm very comfortable with the ruffle, because then, you know, you then determine whether people resonate with your message, or they want to go and do things in the traditional way. But all the evidence is 95% people just don't make it. So if they don't make it, I'd rather look for the 5% and turn that into 6% than worry about the people who don't.
In the next year, Kevin, you obviously have to keep a really good eye on financial markets and sort of money ecosystem. What do you think are going to be some of the priorities for the world and also for individuals in trying to grow and protect their wealth and assets?
That's a really, really great question. And I'm going to give you an answer which is probably not the one you're looking for, which is a standard answer I give when people ask me a question similar to that, which is, you know, I don't deal in predictions, I deal in principles. And I think you've got to be fleet of foot financially. You've got to be looking at markets, which is why if you're investing in different markets, you're almost grounded. You know what's happening in the stock market. You know, we just had a halving on cryptocurrency. So you need to be, what does that mean? And be aware of what's happening in the property market. And of course, we've had massive legislative changes, both in recent years and in current situations. So as long as you're looking in the markets in which you're putting your wealth, and you become, by connecting to people like you and others, you develop that expertise. I mean, you wrote a great guide on your view of what's happening, you know, as far as HMO is concerned with the renters reform. And I think that's the sort of thing to do, is to get involved with people who are outstanding in their field, connect, read, listen, and find out what other people are doing as well. So I don't try and be a guru. I try and signpost other people and act more as a guide. But I think the real skill in all of this is, instead of worrying about markets, is there are micro markets within every market. And the real mastery of wealth is to become someone who plays in a niche. And if you can find, and that can take a while, and that's okay. Because, you know, we're a long time planning retirement. So if it takes you 3 or 4 years to really start to narrow down your niches, and that's what I try and encourage people to do. Find the niche. If it's property, find your niche. If it's investing, find your niche. And once you can get a niche, you can drive your expertise, become a master in that niche, and then you can build and secure and protect your wealth, and then move on to the next niche, and then move on to the next niche. And the more niches you can identify that suit you, and I call that your personal DNA, they reflect who you are, not who somebody else is, but who you are as a family or a couple or whatever it is, then the more secure you're going to be. Notwithstanding, having said that, so many people who get excited about the idea of wealth fail to put in place the basic simple measures like wills, powers of attorney, putting things into trust, which is a way of just putting bubble wrap around them really to protect them. Simple things that often get ignored when the focus is on building instead of protecting. So on the protection side, I'd say, you know, pay attention to the protection side, because, you know, the story of me getting involved in wealth in the first place was stimulated as a catalyst from, you know, a young death of my father in his 40s, who had a very successful business, Wendy, but didn't have wills, powers of attorney, life cover, just didn't put the boring stuff in play, because he was, you know, felt strong and powerful about building. And the whole building can collapse if you don't put the legal structures in place. So we do focus on something called the roof, which is the roof on the logo there, is making your assets watertight as you build them, not wait until you're wealthy and then do it. Do it from the very start, and then grow and grow and grow, and keep getting a bit more knowledgeable about the different use of trusts and so on, but not to bombard people at the outset, really.
Yeah,
That was
great.
decent anyway.
Quick question, Kevin. I know we probably should have started with this, but we're going to end with it. I'd like to understand what got you into this yourself. You mentioned you're an IFA sort of by background, but what got you into this whole world of wealth and asset building?
Well, I touched on it just a moment ago. So when my father died, he was 46. He had a business as an agent for BP and Shell, recruiting workers for North Sea gas in the age of the big expansion of North Sea oil exploration. And we noticed he was doing rather well. And I remember he had a limited company because he showed me what I didn't understand, but it was a certificate of incorporation and all that stuff. And he was very proud, and we could tell our family was moving forward. He died when he was 46 years of age on an oil rig, and but the whole family imploded because nothing was safe, nothing was protected, and that business, which was a really good business, could easily have been passed on, could easily have been ring fenced, wasn't, and everything basically went. The family went backwards, and me and my father were genetically cut from the same cloth. And we walked the same, talked the same. Everybody said, Kevin, John, you're peas in a pod. And I really reflected on this somewhat and thought, if I don't make my older age, I need to have a different plan. So I've got an economics degree. So my intelligence is born out of a love of economics. But rather than be an economist reacting to markets or talking about markets, I decided to get involved in building assets. I didn't know what they were then. I just decided that that's what I was going to do. So I was in my late 20s. And as I got married, I just said to my wife, I'm not going to trade time for money again. I want to build things that will last for you, will last for the children that we didn't yet have. And if she was okay, I was going to burn the employment bridges once and for all and never do it. And we just at the right time because we hadn't built anything yet. And that's what I've done. So over that period of time, all I've done is build recurring income streams, and I don't do anything else. So I never trade time for money. I never evaluate anything in time. And that's an anathema for most people because almost everybody I meet measures their life in how much do I get for so many hours, and I don't. And I've just become a good teacher over the years and able to help people understand how they can make the change if they want to. But for me, the catalyst was strong. So it powered me, it propelled me in a way. For many people, the catalyst isn't there. The reason to change dramatically their thinking doesn't happen because there's nothing acting on them. So, I think it's a really great question to ask. And I'm sure you must have shared why you got into what you were doing, but was there a catalyst too? I mean, I'm not sure I understand everything about what you do, except I know you're great at what you do, but was there a catalyst for you too, Wendy?
Yes, and I think that's a really good point, Kevin, that we all probably do have a catalyst. It's whether we pay attention to it or not. So for me, it was really having children. It was the fact that I had two young children and I had a member of our family sadly passed away, and I was left with a small inheritance pot. And I thought, how can I use it? And it was my mum who said, you should invest in property, because she had seen the power of property investing. And I think if she had had her time again, she would have invested in property, but for various reasons didn't do it. And so when I had this pot of money, the first property I bought was a student shared house. It was my first foray into property investing, and it was my first HMO. And it was a legacy for my children because I was an at-home mum. I didn't have any other income streams. I didn't have a pension. I didn't have any assets. And so I decided that this would be something for my boys to inherit. And that was my trigger. That was where I started. And as my journey took lots of different paths, I was very much a part-time investor, and eventually I got a master's degree and I ended up teaching at university. But it was then a sort of second point in my life when about 10 years ago I decided, oh, I'm sick of university, the politics. Actually, it wasn't the teaching, it was the politics I didn't enjoy. I needed to then grow that secondary income stream so that I could give up my day job. And so that's what I did with HMOs. So I think lots of people do have those triggers, but they suppress them or they discuss them with other people who are nervous about them giving up a well-paid, secure, whatever that means, job.
Yeah.
And so you're right, they carry on trading their time for money without realizing there is actually a very different way to live. And although living like that is quite anathema, it's quite a challenge to society, because most people are taught to go to school, get a degree, get a job, and swap their time for money until they're 67 and then retire. For those of us who don't do that, sometimes we can work longer hours than if we were in a job, but other times you can work not at all and you're still getting paid. And I
Yeah.
think the point is to create what I call residual income. It's recurring residual income. It doesn't mean to say you don't have to look after it. It doesn't mean to say it's completely hands-free. You have to do bits and pieces. You have to manage it. You have to guide it. You're the thinking brain that runs that makes it run like clockwork. But for me, that was where I that was, if you like, my trigger.
And most people have a story when they choose, and you're quite right. And I call it find your first ROI. And they go, what does that mean? They go, your first reason to overcome inertia. If you don't find it, you're never going to be wealthy because you'll stop at the very first challenge. And wealth is challenging. Recently did an interview with the founder of Go Henry, Louise Hill, and we supported her petition to get financial education taught at primary school. And she was saying, I was talking to her about being in business. She founded or co-founded the Go Henry, the card system for young people to get responsibility over money. And she said, being in business is like waking up every day, getting whacked in the face, going to bed and getting up the next day, doing exactly the same thing, getting whacked. She said it's resilience. And when you've got the lure of something easy where the structure is there, of a current business, or because you created that structure, or the structure of a job in a university or anywhere, it's easy to be pulled back into the apparent safety of that, rather than create your own structures around your own wealth. And in my view, you have to be prepared to recognize there are going to be some bumps along the way, and it's not a smooth process. And I think when people fail their own wealth, they're not ready for the challenges that come, and they're not insurmountable because most people can do it. You've done it, I've done it, and I'm sure people on your guests have done it too, as are people in my program. They reach that security level first, then independence. So there's no doubt it works, but most evidence is the catalyst, the reason why, has to be strong. If it's strong, it's always going to work, and if it's weak, it's probably going to fall somewhere down the line.
Kevin, no truer words were said. I think that's an excellent point on which to end. Thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Pleasure.
Yeah. We'll put your links on the bottom of the podcast so that if anybody wants to get in touch with you, find out a bit more about Wealth Builders and what you do and your aims for transforming the knowledge and the outcomes for people in terms of their personal wealth for themselves and their families, which is a tremendous aim and goal. If anyone's interested, they can contact you. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you today on the podcast. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
And thanks for the challenging questions. I enjoyed them.
You're welcome.